Hey guys, here's another video concerning the inference procedures for regression and the slope of the regression line. This is the NEA fat gain data, which I still have in my calculator in L1 and L2, and I have my residuals there in L3. I showed you in the previous video how to check the conditions with the residual plot and histogram of the residuals. In this video, I'll show you quickly just the work that can be done using your calculator and the tests. So if we go over to stat and test, we've been to this page many times looking at our t-tests and intervals. If you cruise down to the bottom, you have linreg t-test and linreg t-int. I'll start with the interval first. Because you'll have to have put the data in your calculator, and this is a rare occurrence where you're given just the data and not the computer output, it's easy enough to pull the parameters, or I guess the statistics, from the table to create your confidence interval. But if you didn't have that, you could do it yourself in your calculator by putting the x's in list 1 and the y's in list 2. In this particular problem, I think we were asked to create a 90% confidence interval. So we'll change this to 0.9. And again, this is your opportunity to store the regression equation, but you don't need to do that. And we'll run it. And what your calculator is going to do is give you these parameters that you perhaps knew if you were given this table, but it also works the confidence interval out for you. The thing you'd have to go find is the t value that it used, which was, I believe, 2 in this problem. It gives you s, which you have on the table there. It gives you b, which you have in the table here. It gives you r and r squared. What it doesn't give you, though, is the standard error, which comes from the table. And it is, again, a rare occurrence where you would need to calculate the standard error by hand. Remember that equation is this guy here. It's the s that you get from the calculator, the standard deviation of the residuals, divided by s of x times the square root of n minus 1. And while easy enough, just in case you forgot, if you wanted to get s of x and work this out to get the standard error, you would just have to run a 1var stat of the x's. So real quick, stat calc 1var stat of the data that's in L1, and then the s of x right there, that 257.65 number. That would be the number that goes in right there. Outside of that, if you wanted to calculate a test, stat test linreg t-test for the data that's in L1 versus L2, you have the choice of doing a two-sided, not equal to 0. You could do less than 0 or a greater than 0 test. Probably wouldn't make sense for us to do a greater than 0 test because the statistic was negative. So either a one-sided to the left or a two-sided test would make sense here. We'll go two-sided just because we just did the confidence interval, so there should be a connection between a confidence interval, which gives you a set of plausible values, versus a two-sided test, which tells you at what point you would reject outside of 0. And this is, again, a test for beta. Your calculator also does this same test for rho here. Don't worry about that. That's not for us. But it happens to be the same test. Rho is the population correlation. Regression equation, if you wanted to store it, you could do that. But we're going to run the test. Now, when you run the test, it tells you that this is the test for beta equals 0 versus rho equals 0. But just ignore the rho business there. What you see is the test statistic t here. This is the calculation. This is b minus 0 over the standard error of b is negative 4.64. That number is the t from the table. So if you have this table, there really is no reason to run this on the calculator. And the p-value, this 3.8 times 10 to the negative fourth, is this p-value here, which is effectively 0. Again, you don't need to run this if you've got the table, but just to see where those numbers come from and what they mean, That's what that t-value is. It's not the t for the confidence interval. So hopefully you've got some guidance now on what your calculator can do for you and how to work it.